There are several videos that focus on the setup of management information that can be tracked in CenterPoint. That management information includes things like profit centers, production year, projects, and other items. This video will focus on how to capture that information in a transaction. In other words, how to allocate your different revenue and expenses to those different areas of your business that you have set up as management details. To go ahead and demonstrate how to enter in this information in a transaction, I'm going to bring up a payment transaction screen, but this is going to be true of any of our transaction screens. So in all of our transaction screens, we have some basic information up at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in the vendor that this transaction is for. It's for our area ag center. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose my check number, my date, and then the amount of money that it was. So we're going to have $15,000. Okay, then we're going to come down here and we are going to select our account. So the transaction that I was going to enter in was for some custom work that was done on our blacktop field. Well, our blacktop field is actually broken up into two different crops, which are our profit centers. So the crops are going to be corn and soybeans. And the production center is going to be our blacktop field. So that's our location where this activity occurred. And it is for the production year of 2021. So I'm going to start this out by choosing my custom work in process. So this is activity that I'm putting into a work in process account. I have a place here where I can identify the invoice number that this is for, and then the quantity, if there is a unit of measure, if there's some sort of quantity that I need to capture, I can put that into the quantity field. Okay, so I'm going to capture the number of acres that this custom work was for. So this was for 150 acres here, and the amount was $7,500. So this field is 300 acres and it's broken into 150 corn and 150 soybeans. So it's going to be an even break between them. Now, when entering in a transaction with management details, each line of the transaction is going to have its own set of details. So if I'm splitting this between corn and soybeans, but everything else is the same, it's the same production center and it's the same production year, then I need two different lines for the transaction. So in order to enter in a transaction with those details, you'll see here on the transaction line here that there is a details button. And that detail button, if we go ahead and click on that, has some additional information that can be entered in about this transaction. For example, I can tab over here and say that this part of the transaction is going to be allocated to our corn profit center for the production year of 2021 and for the production center of blacktop. Okay, now if I had had some sort of project that I needed to allocate this to, then I could go ahead and allocate this to a project too. So maybe this is for planting expenses. So maybe I want to go ahead and create a project called planting. So you can always create new items from your lookups there. So if it isn't something that is already set up on one of the setup lists, you can always create a new one from there. So right here, I've gone ahead and I've allocated this $7,500 to corn for the year 2021 for the production center of blacktop and for the project of planting. All of these fields here, the production center detail, the profit center, the production year, the production series, production center, inventory location, associated account, and project are details that can be entered in and changed with each line of the transaction. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that, and then we're going to drop down to the next line, and we're going to go ahead and choose that same account. So it's all still going to the same account, and it's going to be the same invoice number. It's still for the other 150 acres, and that part is going to be $7,500 as well. So I can go ahead and click on the detail and go ahead and this time choose soybean. And for the production center of Blacktop. Okay. For those of you who think that it would be a lot to have to click on the detail button each time that you were entering in that transaction. So right now we have to click on the detail button to enter that in. We have the ability to add columns of information to this grid so that you don't have to click on the detail button. To do that, you want to go ahead and right click on the grid and go to add remove columns. Okay, right here, I can go ahead and I could add the columns of detail that I very regularly change. So I can add things like I can add the profit center, the production center, and the production year to this grid. Now they're all the way down here and the other selected columns are up at the top. So this button up in the top right there that looks like a sheet of paper with an arrow pointing up, if I click on that, it'll bring those other selected columns up with the current selected columns. And then from there, I can highlight them and I can move them up or use these left and up and down arrow buttons to move them up and down on the list and position them wherever I want them. I happen to want them at the end, so that's fine. I'm going to leave them there and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now we have reconfigured this particular transaction screen to include that information right here on this grid so that I don't have to go to the detail button to enter in that information. Each transaction screen in CenterPoint has its own settings for which columns are going to be displayed. Okay, so I can save this transaction and then I'm going to close out of the transaction screen and come back just so you can see here that it is going ahead and saving that setting so that profit center, production center, and production year are going to be there all the time now for this transaction screen. However, if I were to go into a different transaction screen, such as vendor invoices, for example, it's going to have its own settings for what fields show up on that grid. So you do have to set that setting for each transaction screen. Okay, there are other ways to go ahead and enter in those details in a transaction. One of those ways is by using an account distribution, and that is covered in the video on account distributions.